right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring or World's Most Exciting Classroom event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Today's session, we have a few things to share today, including starting off with where in the world is the Oosterschelde right now and the DARWIN200 team. So I'm going to share my screen here really quickly, and we're going to find out. There we go. That should be nice and full screen now. And well, if you look right now, it would be hard to figure out where they are. You just see a bunch of blue. But so let's back out a little bit here and let's see what's going on. So a few weeks ago, we left Cape Town and we crossed this chunk of the Atlantic here to get to St. Helena. We would last week have talked a little bit about our time on St. Helena, including our time with Jonathan, the giant Seychelles tortoise, who is very likely the oldest living land animal right now, about 193 years old. And now we have made it to our next destination. This is actually the second last stop on this DARWIN200 journey following Darwin's Voyage of the Beagle around the world. If I zoom in here, we are now at Ascension. Ascension is part of the British Overseas Territories. It is a small little speck of an island here in the Atlantic. We won't be there for too long. We can only stay for a little bit. And one of the reasons is because Ascension is essentially closed off to visitors. There's some military installations there. There's some people who live there as well. But tourists haven't been allowed to visit for quite some time. Ships can only visit if they're there for scientific purposes. You have to get research permits, which aren't easy to do, but luckily we worked away at it for a while and we were able to get our permits to come and visit. And the big research project that we'll be doing while we're there is using a deep sea pump. So dropping a pump to about 200 meters. And then we are taking water samples, filtering the water for eDNA, environmental DNA, so we can see what is living at those deeper depths. We can look at the DNA that the animals, the marine life leaves behind in the water. And then we can see what was swimming through that water, which is really cool. So we've actually been taking eDNA samples ever since Fiji. So if I back up the map a little bit here and we go all the way back. So here is Fiji up here. So all the way through this part of the Pacific, New Zealand, Australia, all the way across the Pacific again. And then all the way across the Atlantic. And so we were taking those samples, but they were surface samples. So samples from the surface level. But now, since we've left Cape Town, we've been taking deeper samples. We have Mariana on board, who hopefully we'll get to meet when the ship gets to the Azores. And she's doing that research all the way up till we get to the Azores. The last stop on the journey before we arrive back in Falmouth in the UK in July of this year. So I'm going to come back from that screen share. Unfortunately, we still don't have connectivity with the ship. With both Starlink units being down, it won't be till the Azores when we can get new Starlink units out to the ship. So for the time being, Ascension has satellite internet. So I've been able to talk to our expedition leader, Stu. So I know how they're doing. And then he sent me some really cool video clips from the last day or so that he's been out exploring Ascension Island a little bit. So that's what I'd like to do next is play a few of these really cool clips from Stu so you guys can see what Ascension looks like. And then you can see one of the really cool bird species that lives on Ascension as well. So this first one is a little overview of Ascension and then a really nice view of the island. So give me 1 second to get that video queued up. And then we're going to get to take a look at that one. There it is.
Welcome to Ascension Island. This is one of the most interesting islands in the world, and it has an amazing story to tell. So Charles Darwin got here in 1836. This is one of the final destinations of the Voyage of the Beagle. He landed down over there in what is today Georgetown, and at the time there were just a few dozen Marines, about 60 or 70 Marines, with a little Union Jack flag and a few tents and storehouses. This is the end of the world. This is a really dusty, barren, dramatic island. The island itself looked like this. Dry cinder cones, lava flows, and ash. It really is a very barren place. There are no native trees at all, and just a few ferns and grasses and small plants. There's a euphorbiaceae. He called it as milkweed with poisonous sap. So there's nothing really you can eat on the land itself. So when they arrived here, when Darwin arrived here, he noted that the garrison of soldiers were very thirsty because the closest water points were little drip points, as in literally drip, drip, drip from the rocks, 7 miles away and 9 miles away. Imagine going with donkeys and barrels across this landscape, trying to get your water every time you wanted a drink. It was a very difficult place to live and a very hostile and inhospitable landscape. But Darwin came up with an idea. Working with his great friend Joseph Hooker, one of the greatest botanists of the 19th century, the two of them planned an experiment. On ships sailing to Ascension Island, they sent plants from Kew and from the Cape Colony, what's now South African Cape Town. They sent plants from all across the world and wanted to plant them on the tallest peak. At the time, the tallest peak was known as Green Hill because it had a dusting of green on it, of ferns and grasses. But it really looked like this. It was dry, ashy and barren. They started off planting the trees at the very top of that Green Hill. Today it's known as Green Mountain. And little by little, those trees built up leaflet on the soil, they caught the humidity and the oceanic winds, and they established as forest. And today, it is the first and only totally man-made rainforest in the world. There it is, over there. Can you see how green it is? There's 3 distinct layers that we're going to go and explore later. That's Green Mountain. It's incredible. Darwin and Hooker transformed a barren, ashy cinder cone like this, with all this red volcanic lava and ash and cinder, into a rainforest-clad mountain. And it was a total success. They managed to capture the rain in huge quantities and supply the garrison. And for 100 years, that's where the island got its water.
All right, so pretty cool. A pretty cool story about Darwin and an experiment that they tried on the island that led to the establishment of a rainforest-type ecosystem over time, and then plenty of water for the island, which is pretty cool. And then you got a real good look at Ascension. It really is one of the most remote places on the planet. Yeah, it's a place that's been impacted by invasive species in the past. We're going to learn about a little bit more about that in just a moment. And it is a place that's hard to get to right now. So we consider ourselves very lucky, very fortunate to be able to visit Ascension because right now it's one of the hardest places in the world to visit because of how remote it is and because it's basically been closed down to tourism. There's just a handful of research vessels that get to visit it, and the Oosterschelde, we're really lucky to be one of those and be able to bring you back some really cool footage. So I see a couple questions coming in the chat. Did we anchor the boat where Charles Darwin did? As close as we could. So we are anchored. I might have a little picture here. Let me see if I can find the picture of the boat at anchor. Give me 1 second to jump into my downloads because I do think I have an anchor picture. Let's see. Here it is. Okay, let me open this up and let me share my screen. So I'll show you where we are at anchor right now. So we are at anchor because there's no spot where we can, like they don't have a pier, like a cement pier where we can. So here we go. This is kind of some rocky shore and you can see the boat is anchored just offshore here. It's probably not in the exact place where Darwin anchored with the Beagle, but it's probably relatively close. It's probably in a similar area, not the exact spot, but this picture, maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger here. Oops, that's the wrong one. There we go. So that gives you just an idea of where the ship is anchored right now. And then to get to shore, we have our little Zodiac, and the Zodiac goes back and forth, can bring people back and forth, can get some supplies from the shore and bring them back as well. So that's just a little view of where we are right now. I'm going to answer some more questions in just a moment. I want to play the next video first, and then I'll come back and I'll answer a few more questions. So I mentioned invasive species. They were a problem on Ascension. But there's some success stories. And this next story that Stu's going to share with us is an example of what good conservation work can do. So just give me 1 second here. We'll get the next video loaded and we'll take a look at it here together.
Charles Darwin trekked all across Ascension Island, and in the southwest he noted big seabird colonies. I'm very happy to say there's seabirds here still to this very day, and they have quite an interesting story. The seabirds on Ascension Island lived without land predators before man arrived. There were no animals that would attack or eat them, so as a result they're very tame, as this little masked booby sitting next to me proves. Let's have a look. Note there's no nest. This masked booby has laid her eggs directly on the ground. There's no actual nest structure at all. They just cleared away pebbles and the eggs are resting directly on the sand and the substrate. When the ships did arrive though, cats, rats and mice were introduced, and these had a devastating impact, especially the cats. As you can see, the poor little boobies were very easy pickings for the cats, and they were easy prey. Most of the bird colonies, in fact all of them except sooty terns, were wiped out from the mainland of Ascension Island. There's a tiny little islet just off the coast there behind me called Boatswain Island, and that's where all of the bird species survived, and thankfully also the endemic frigate bird that occurs nowhere else in the world. Well, a few decades ago, conservationists came to Ascension Island and really focused on looking after the birds. They wiped out the cats, the feral cats that weren't meant to be here, the cats that were killing all these beautiful seabirds, and they severely controlled the rats and the mice. And the birds are slowly coming back. I was here 13 years ago, and there were a few hundred masked boobies down at the coast behind me, but now there are thousands coming back, nesting here on the beautiful mainland of Ascension, like this little one here. And the numbers are increasing, and hopefully spreading back all across the island. So it looks like there's a positive future for these beautiful seabirds of Ascension Island.
All right. So Stu's iPhone microphone didn't cooperate too well for that one. I'm going to have to bump up the volume for our event tomorrow. But that was a masked booby, in case you didn't catch the name. And what Stu was saying, humans brought invasive species, things like cats, mice and rats. And because the birds are just laying their eggs in, nests on the ground, sometimes just little piles of rocks, the eggs, the chicks, they were easy to be eaten by mice and rats and cats. The baby chicks, the adult birds could be caught by cats as well. So the numbers of seabirds really fell on the island. So they worked really hard to get rid of all the cats on the island because they don't belong there. They're not native to the island. And they did some large programs to remove as much of the mice and rats as they could. And it's worked. So, where, as Stu said earlier, there was a handful of the masked boobies living near the shore. Now there's thousands of them living on the island again. And of course, other seabird species are benefiting as well. The masked booby is just the example that we looked at there. So I have a few questions here that we can go through. So the first one is, how far is Ascension from Australia? It's about 15,000 kilometers. So it's pretty far from Australia. It's about as far away as you can get from Australia. Really, it is quite far, quite remote there in the middle of the Atlantic. Another question about Ascension. Was it named after somebody? Why is it called Ascension? Well, originally it was discovered in 1501 by the Portuguese, and they named it Conception. But then I guess no one visited for about 2 years after that. So it was rediscovered 2 years later in 1503, and it was on a day that was called Ascension Day. And so that's why they decided to name the island Ascension. And then that name is stuck. It's kind of had that name ever since. Let's see. The highest mountain. So it's actually the one that Stu pointed the camera to, called Green Mountain. And if you think about other mountains around the world, it's not actually that high. But on the island, I think it's about 895 meters tall. So Green Mountain, where they brought those different plant species, built up soil over time, and have created this rainforest ecosystem. It's called Green Mountain, and it is about 895 meters tall. How big are the mast boobies? If you had a ruler in your classroom, I would say that if it was just sitting on the ground, it would be just a little bit longer than your ruler. So if you have a ruler in your classroom, that's about 30 centimeters. The mast boobies are just a little bit, I would say, bigger than that. And then how many different birds are on the island? George, that's a really good question. I'm going to have to double check that because there are definitely bird species that used to live on the island, but then have been lost due to probably hunting by humans, the introduction of invasive species. But let's see what Google says about bird species currently on Ascension. And maybe they'll have information about how many were there before humans found the island. So there are 102 bird species. 102 bird species can or have been recorded on the island. So that doesn't mean that they're all there. That includes species that were introduced by humans, and that also includes accidental species. So accidental species, sometimes a bird ends up on an island by accident. There could be a big storm and it's blown off course, or it's blown away from the mainland, maybe somewhere like Africa, and it ends up out on the island. So there's been 102 bird species recorded, and then the island is home to 11 species of seabirds that breed there, which means these birds come and they build nests, lay their eggs. They spend most of the time on their ocean looking for fish, but they use the island as their breeding spot. So 102 species, 11 breeding seabird species, and that 102 species includes species that maybe have only been spotted once because they turned up accidentally, and it includes species that were introduced by humans as well. Mia, how long do the birds live? I would say that my guess is 3 to 5 years, but I'm going to double check that. Okay, so the mast booby can actually live up to 15 years if everything is going well. They reach adulthood at 4 years of age, and then they return back to their islands where they breed, and then they can live. So the oldest recorded was 25 years old. So that's pretty cool. So they can actually, if they find food and they do well, they can live up to 15 to 20 years. And then some of them can even live a little bit longer. Very cool. Okay. How many eggs do they lay? So it's 2, usually around 2. And then 2 chicks don't always survive. It really just depends on conditions in the ocean. So if fishing is good, the parents are finding lots of food, there's a good chance they can raise 2 chicks. However, sometimes only one survives. The stronger chick, it can fight a little harder to get the food from the parents. And so sometimes the second chick doesn't make it. So yeah, it's the same in the Galapagos too. Sometimes you would see nests. There's blue-footed boobies, red-footed boobies, Nazca boobies in the Galapagos. Sometimes you'd see nests with 1 chick, and sometimes you'd see nests with 2 chicks. It depends on how good the fishing is and how well the parents are able to find food in a particular year. Okay. Well, let's take a little break and let's take a look at our experiments, and then we'll continue with another cool video, and then we'll go on to our curiosities before we wrap up for this week. So a few weeks ago, we had our solar system experiment, and that experiment was really cool. Basically, we wanted you to go out into your schoolyard or maybe a park or something with something to represent the planets and the sun, and then take your best guesses at how far away each planet would be from the sun. So we have the results video here to share with you. And I think you'll be really, really impressed with this video. So let me cue it up. Let's take a look at the results video, and then maybe we'll talk about it for a moment once we wrap up. So video, there it is.
Welcome back, everyone. How did you get on thinking about the distances between the planets in our solar system? Well, in today's experiment, we're going to find out exactly how far the planets are relative to one another. I've put out this 100-meter long measuring tape that goes way down here. I'm going to start at this point here. If you remember, we used this orange balloon to represent the sun. So let's put the sun right here at the start of our measuring tape. The first planet, we used this little yellow pinhead to represent its scale relative to the balloon. This is Mercury, and Mercury would be 9 meters away from the sun at this scale. So let's walk 9 meters. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Here we go. So I'll put the little pinhead representing Mercury there so we can see it as we go further along the measuring tape. The next planet, Venus, would be about the size of this pea, and that's another 9 meters along the measuring tape, about 18 meters in distance from the sun. So let's walk out to about 18 meters along the measuring tape. Let's have a look, 18 here. So we'll put Venus right here, and I'll put another flag so we can see it as we go further. Earth would also be roughly about the same size of a pea. Remember, this scale is really approximate, but still. So that would be 25 meters from the sun. Let's have a look here. 23, 24, 25. So we'll put a flag there, and this P representing Earth right here. We used this tiny little red pinhead to represent the fourth planet, Mars, and that would be 38 meters from the sun. So we've got a bit of a distance to walk down further. So let's find 38 along the measuring tape. 38, 36, 37, 38. Here we go. So Mars would be about here. And I put this red flag here. The next planet, Jupiter, would be roughly about the size of this walnut in relative scale to the balloon at the start, representing the sun. And amazingly, that is 130 meters. So I think off the end of our measuring tape, but let's go and approximate it all the same. And remember, Jupiter is considered to be the gas giant of the solar system, but at this scale, it really doesn't feel that giant, does it? So look, here's the end of the measuring tape. This marks 100 meters from the start that the sun is. So we've got to go another 30 meters. So let's roughly count these out. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 9, 30. Okay, so very approximately, this is about 130 meters from the sun. So Jupiter would sit right there. The next planet, Saturn, if you remember, we used this hazelnut roughly to represent the size of Saturn. Saturn would be 239 meters, so 109 meters further from this point. So let's walk that out. I think I'm going to have to start approximating. We're at about 200 meters now. I think 239 meters is roughly around here at the start of this path. So let's put a flag here. And our little hazelnut representing Saturn would sit right there. The next planet, Uranus, would be roughly about the size of this pebble. And believe it or not, at this scale, Uranus would be over 480 meters. And I'm afraid I've actually run out of park now. It would be somewhere by those lights down there, I think. After Uranus, Of course, we then have Neptune, which also would be roughly about the size of one of these pebbles. That would be an astonishing 749 meters away. So 3 times this distance, still further on. Probably somewhere way past those buildings in the distance. And last of all, Pluto, which at this scale would be the size of a 2-millimeter grain of sand, would be over 1 kilometer away. So right down there, probably somewhere near those cranes you can see in the distance. Just think for a moment about the mind-boggling scale of the universe, with Pluto as this 2-millimeter grain of sand over 1 kilometer away from the balloon representing the sun. It honestly is astonishing that the planets were discovered in the first place. And just to think of the technology that scientists have developed, not only to photograph, but to visit these tiny planets so far away in our solar system. It really is mind-blowing. So, how did you get on? Could you work out the distances between the planets in your solar system? How did they compare to the real distances that I've measured out here? Next time you watch a sci-fi movie and see shots of all of those planets bunched together like bowling balls, think to the real scale of the solar system. It is mind-blowing to consider how far all of these celestial bodies are from one another. Thank you very much for watching, and let's find out who won this week's prizes.
All right, let's come. Whoops. There we go. Let's come back from that screen share. Yeah, so I don't think anybody has a schoolyard or a park that's big enough to contain the solar system at that scale. And remember, the sun was only the size of a balloon in this scale. So it shows you how massive our solar system really is. We always see the pictures where all the planets, you can see them all in one picture, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I want to give you a few numbers here just to illustrate it for you. The sun in our experiment was only the diameter of a balloon. In reality, the sun has a diameter around the sun, across the sun from end to end of 865,000 miles. 865,000 miles, the diameter of the sun. How many Earths? How does that compare to Earth? Well, means we could put 1.3 million Earths inside of the sun. That's how big the sun is. And then if you think about Pluto, in our scale, Pluto was about 1 kilometer, maybe a little over 1 kilometer away from that balloon that we had representing the sun. But in reality, Pluto is 3.7 billion miles away from the sun. So that gives you a real idea of how big our solar system is. And it gives you an idea of why the scale was so big. When we had the really small balloon, it was still 1 kilometer away for Pluto, when in reality, Pluto is 3.7 billion miles away when everything is blown up to the proper size it should be. That's pretty wild. And I think most of you probably know Pluto is no longer considered a planet. Astronomers have voted it out because of a few different reasons, its shape and size. So yes, Pluto is considered a dwarf planet now. So there's 8 official planets. Pluto, we used to say it was the 9th planet, but now astronomers consider Pluto to be a dwarf planet. So it's not one of our big planets anymore. So that's pretty cool. Okay, we have a brand new experiment. Last week, we did an experiment from my office, and I have another office experiment this week. And this one is one you should be able to try pretty easy in your classroom. You don't need very many supplies. But the goal of this experiment is to trick your brain. So that's what we want to do with our experiment this week. We want to trick your brains, and you're going to understand a little bit more about what I'm talking about when I play the experiment. But the goal is to trick our brains. So let's check this out. We have an experiment for this week, and I picked a really, really easy experiment that anybody should be able to do at home or in the classroom. You really only need 3 bowls and some water. And I chose this experiment for two reasons. One is it fools your brain. So it's kind of a fun experiment where you trick your body. We can't always fool our brain. We can't always fool our body, but this is one experiment where we can. And then this experiment as well has to do a little bit with evolution, a little bit with an evolutionary response that our body does have. So I want to show you this experiment. It is so easy to do. And let me share my camera here. I've got a second camera loaded up, and I'm going to switch over to it now. And then we are going to, there we go. You should still hear me. All you need is 3 bowls. So here we go. I've got 2 bowls. Oh, there we go. And then a third one, a little bit bigger, that's going to go in the middle. So 1, 2, 3 bowls. In the bowls, you're going to put 3 different kinds of water. In one bowl, you're going to put hot water. Now, don't make it so hot you burn your hand, but make it nice and warm so that you can feel that it's pretty warm. You might want some supervision for this. Maybe your teacher, maybe a guardian at home can help you with the warm water. So not so warm that you're going to burn your hand, but warm enough that you can tell you're putting your hand in really nice warm water. In the other one on the end, you're going to put cold water, as cold as you can get it. Maybe you can get it really cold from the tap. Maybe you're going to want to add a little bit of ice to it. So warm water on one side, really cold water on the other, and you're going to put your hands, both your hands, one into the warm, one into the cold. And you're going to keep your hands there for 30 seconds. So hands in the water, 30 seconds, and wait. Count down those 30 seconds. A little bit longer wouldn't hurt, but at least 30 seconds. Then you're going to take your hands out and put them into the middle bowl. In the middle bowl, you're going to have regular water, room temperature water. So just what you'd normally get from your tap, or you can have the water sit maybe for part of the day. So it just gets to the same temperature as your room. Hot water in one, cold in the other. Keep your hands in each for 30 seconds and then put them both into the middle bowl, the room temperature bowl, and see what you feel. I'm going to tell you right now, it is going to feel really strange. One hand will feel very different from the other hand, and it might surprise you a little bit at first. So, warm water and cold water, one in each bowl. Keep your hands in for 30 seconds, then put them both into the the room temperature bowl in the middle. You could experiment different ways and do it separately. So keep one hand in the warm, then put it into the room temperature bowl, or keep one in the cold, then put it in. But do try it with both hands, because it is going to be quite a strange feeling when you put your hands in. So a very easy experiment for this week. 3 bowls, some water, hot water in one, really cold water in the other, and room temperature in the middle. So let's switch my camera views back here. We'll take this one away. You have 2 weeks to try that experiment at home or in the classroom. Send in pictures trying that experiment to DARWIN200.com. And then I want you to try and tell us what you think happened, why your hands felt the way you did when you took the cold water hand and put it in the room temperature hand, when you took the hot water hand and put it in the room temperature bowl. I want you to try to explain why you think your hands felt the way they did. I know I'm sounding a little bit funny, but I don't want to ruin the results of the experiment. I want you to feel and be surprised at how you can fool your brain with this very, very simple experiment. All right, there we go. That is our experiment for the next 2 weeks. A nice, simple, easy one where we're going to trick our brains and we're going to see if we can activate an evolutionary response. So your job is to give it a try at home or in the classroom. You just need 3 bowls. You need room temperature water. You need warm water. You need cold water. Again, a note on the warm water. Don't make it so hot you're going to burn your hand, but you do want it to be nice and warm. So you know you're putting your hand in warm water, but we don't want it to be so hot that you're going to burn your hand. You will have 2 weeks to send in your best guesses and some pictures, of course, to classroom@darwin200.com. We've got that up there for you. And I'm really interested to hear what students felt and why they think they felt this way. That's the best way I can put it. You have to experience it for yourself to kind of see and understand what's going on. Okay, so before we do our curiosity, I want to play a couple clips. So we've been playing clips the last few weeks from our time in South Africa. Not too long ago, I took you guys on a safari when I was up in the northern part of South Africa. And then we checked out the sharks when I did the cage diving with the sharks. And this week, I want to spend a little bit of time with the African penguins. So I was really lucky to have a chance to visit Dyer Island. That's what it's called, Dyer Island. So it's about 10 kilometers offshore. There are tens of thousands of seabirds that live there. And most importantly are the endangered African penguins. There is a relatively large colony, so hundreds of birds that live and breed on that island. I want to share with you what it's like to visit this island. You can only visit this. Nobody lives on the island. You can only visit the island for research purposes, so it's hard to get permission. But I was able to go there with Marine Dynamics and the Dyer Island Conservation Trust. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to take a look at how you get to Dyer Island to start. And then we'll meet some of the inhabitants of Dyer Island. So bear with me for a second. This should come up right about now. So you can see that we are in Hans Bay, and there is a boat launch, a boat ramp in Hans Bay. We lower the Zodiac. This is a tiny, tiny little rubber boat with 2 big engines. So there is just enough room on this boat for Francois, the guy driving, and sitting in the back. Here we're revving up the engines. There's the little truck that dropped us off into the water on our little Zodiac. As you can see, it's not very big. And then we had about 8 to 9 kilometers to go across these sections of the ocean and make our way to the island. So it was kind of a bumpy day. It was a little bit rough. Yeah, really, really cool. And a lot of fun to make our way across like this. Watch this video for a moment. Beginning of the day, the sun was just coming up. We were jumping over the wave. And I'd say it took us somewhere between 20 or 30 minutes to get out to Dyer Island. So this is Dyer Island. You can already see thousands of seabirds. The rocks are covered with them. The sky is full of them. The island's very flat. And then there's this little bit of building here. There's not much to it. You can see the like kelp forest there in the water. But if you look on the land, it's covered in seabirds. The sky is full of seabirds. It's a really important breeding island for seabirds off the coast of Hans Bay in South Africa. Then there's these little structures here. This is where the penguins, they used to have nests. They would build their nests in guano, which was their poop. It built up to be meters high, this guano, this poop. But humans scraped all the guano off the island to use as fertilizer, which meant there was nowhere for the penguins to make their nest. So conservationists have built these nest boxes for them. And it keeps them cool, it keeps the eggs and the chicks cool, because they can't dig their nest naturally like they used to. They have to use these nest boxes. So it's very loud on Dyer Island. Those white birds in the middle are terns, and then the birds around the boxes, those are some of the African penguins. In the background, over the stone wall, you see all those things bobbing in the water. And that's actually the kelp. That's the tops of the giant kelp that grows from the bottom. Kelp is some of the fastest growing plants in the world. And so this island is surrounded by kelp forest. Now, living on this island for 3 weeks at a time is Luando. And he is kind of like a ranger, a conservationist. He gets dropped off on the island and lives there by himself for 3 weeks. Then he gets a week off. He comes back to the mainland. And then after a week, he goes back out and lives on the island for another 3 weeks. So can you imagine how lonely you would be living on this island, just you and tens of thousands of seabirds? He gets up every day. He patrols the island, counts birds, looks to see if there's predators or other issues on the island. Does little bits of research. Occasionally, a scientist or someone might come out to the island, so he'll kind of help show them around. So 3 weeks every month, all year long, living alone on this island. But let's meet Luando, and he'll tell you a little bit about the penguins. And I think he might tell you a little bit about himself as well. So let's watch this little clip.
Hi, my name is Luando Baleni, and I am a seabird ranger here on Dyer Island Nature Reserve, which is located about 8 to 10 kilometers from Plain Bay Harbor. Basically, I'm an avid conservationist. I'm someone who's very passionate about working in the natural environment, and we are on Dyer Island.
All right. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do here on Dyer Island.
So the work that we do is mainly working with seabirds and working with African penguins in particular, Cape cormorants, crown cormorants, white-breasted cormorants. We have a lot of swift terns, roseate terns here on the island. So this is basically one of our main breeding grounds for these bird species here on the southern part of South Africa. And there's a lot of effort that we've put into like conservation and sort of keeping this area as natural as possible. Working with various partners, Cape Nature included. So this is basically a protected area that we assist them in sort of running this with the logistics and the manpower, and just basically ensuring that everything is running smoothly on Dyer Island.
All right. And so over your shoulder we can see some of the African penguins.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about this species, the African penguin.
Yeah, African penguins, they are critically endangered, unfortunately, so the population numbers have declined considerably over the last 50 to 60 years. Basically we work a lot. We have a lot of resources, a lot of time, energy invested in sort of establishing stability amongst the African penguin population. They are very resilient species. In my opinion, they've been going through a lot, whether it's predation, whether it's the distance they have to travel to get their food supply, resistance from the fishing industry, oil spills, etc. So they are very resilient species, and they're one of our tougher seabirds. This is their natural habitat, so they spend about 12 hours in the water and 12 hours on land, and they've got specialized fur or feathers rather to sort of waterproofing, assisting them staying longer in the water. And they basically feed on sardines mainly, so they're basically one of our priority species here on Dyer Island Nature Reserve.
All right, so there's a clip of Luando. He's the nicest guy. He works really hard. 3 weeks, again, 3 weeks, protecting those seabirds, doing some research, patrolling the island. He says he really enjoys, that time alone. He brings books. He patrols the island, so his work keeps him pretty busy. Pretty crazy to spend that time, 3 weeks every single month. But he loves the conservation work. He loves the penguins. So it's a good fit. It's a job that makes him happy. And so we saw Luando out on the island, but let's get a closer look at those penguins in the wild. Let me cue up this video and we'll look at those penguins. Here they are. These are our African penguins. There's about 8,000 breeding pairs left in Africa. You can find them in Libya and South Africa. 8,000 breeding pairs isn't very much when you consider there would have been millions of them before humans turned up and changed the habitat, hunted, and took the eggs, and then of course took the guano that was so important for them to make their nests in, even stripped it off the island and from the colonies and used it for fertilizer. Now these birds are in trouble because of overfishing. They're in trouble because of climate change. The temperatures are changing.
Yeah, there's just nothing better than being out in nature.
Yeah, definitely.
So we don't hunt them anymore. We don't take the guano, but introduce predators, climate change, things like that. Fishing, overfishing is still impacting them. And then this is what a more natural nest would have looked like. You saw the nest boxes. This penguin found a spot underneath some rocks, so it's almost like a little cave. So that's a little bit more of a natural nest. So there are still some natural nest spots. And you can see these penguins in the water. When a big group of penguins are floating in the water, we call it a raft of penguins. You'll often see when they're further out in the ocean and they're hunting fish, they'll often float at the surface together while they're resting before they dive back under to look for some more fish. This is a few video clips of some of those wild African penguins. People often make the mistake of calling them South African penguins, but they can also be found in Namibia as well. So African penguins is a better name for it because they're found in a couple spots in Africa. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share with you today. We need to take a look at our curiosities. So we have last week's curiosity, which was a really tricky one. We had lots and lots of answers. We had a couple classes get it right, so I did have to pick a draw out of the, I think 4 classrooms got it right this week. That sounds right, 4 classrooms. So I will announce that winner shortly. But first, let's take a look at the video. So just bear with me while it loads, and we will take a look at the answer to last week's curiosity. It was a good one.
Welcome back, everyone. Last week, I asked you to try and identify these 2 sharp, pointy little objects. I told you that they weren't teeth in the strict sense of the word. Could you work out what they are? Well, believe it or not, these are known as rostral spikes. They occurred on the snout of an ancient species of sawfish. Just like sawfish today, the snout was used in a swiping action, which would stun or injure or kill prey that the sawfish would then go and eat. In this particular species of ancient sawfish, the spikes are barbed. The sawfish that are alive today don't have these barbs, but other than that, they're quite similar, showing that sawfish haven't changed very much for millions of years, because these fossils date back to the Cretaceous period, over 100 million years ago. Did you guess that these were the spikes of a sawfish? Let's find out who won this week's prize. Thank you for watching and for taking part.
All right. Sorry about that. I was just checking my inbox because we do have an entry for the solar system that just came in. So I'm going to share that in just a moment because I know how much students love to see their work being featured. But yeah, so that was it. It was from the rostrum of a sawfish. So rostrum is just a fancy name for like the snout, I guess. I don't think you call it a beak. Snout, I think, is maybe a better term. But the scientific term is the rostrum, and they're very similar to teeth, but they definitely aren't used as teeth. Sawfish aren't going around and chewing things up. They're slashing their rostrums through the water to stun fish, to injure fish, and then that makes them easier to eat them and use their actual teeth. We do still have some sawfish with us today. on our planet. Unfortunately, they're highly endangered, which definitely seems to be a theme with our sharks. We're losing sharks all over the world because of overfishing, the shark fin industry, where they're making things like shark fin soup, or they're drying the fins and the shark cartilage for medicinal purposes, even though there's been lots of tests and there's no evidence that there's any medicinal value to shark parts. And then catching by accident, so bycatch. We're overfishing our oceans. We're using big nets and we're catching all kinds of things we don't mean to catch. But bycatch is when we catch things we don't want to, and then they're discarded, thrown back into the ocean. And usually by that time, that marine life that's caught by mistake, it's not alive anymore when it's thrown back into the ocean. So sawfish are endangered, but that was pretty cool to be able to see that. And then we've got Miss Steinhoff's class. So they are a 3rd grade class. They're in Wellington in New Zealand. They were one of the classes who sent in the correct answer, and they were picked in the draw. We had so many great guesses. I'm going to list a few of them. Harpoon, tip were some of them. Some people thought that there may be claws or talons of something like a harpy eagle. A few people guessed teeth, even though Stu gave the hint that it's not teeth. But 4 classes did some research and were able to come up with the response. I think crab claws, lobster claws were a few other different ones. Thorns from an acacia tree or something like that. So yeah, we had some really good guesses. Let's take a look at this week's curiosity. This is going to be a tricky one, and I've been waiting to do this one. I actually have it here in my office with me, and I'm really excited to see what guesses students come up with for this one. So here we go. This is our curiosity for this week. I'll describe it a little bit. I'm going to hold it a little closer to the camera and see if that helps. This is the inner portion. It's very kind of white and smooth. The outer portion is kind of dirty and discolored. You can see that it has layers. So down here, you can see where it was compressed together. And that's how it would look, I guess, normally. And then it started to split up here because it's a fragment of something larger. So there's another clue for you. And it's not like a mineral or a rock. So I'll give you that clue as well. It is from a living thing. So I'll give you one more clue. So here it is. It is smooth and white on the inside. It is part of a large object. It's from a living thing, and you can see how it was tightly compressed together down here. But when it broke into fragments, it kind of split into these separate layers. So this is a tricky one. I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of answers come in for this one. You have 1 week to send in your best guesses to classroom@darwin200.com. Classroom@darwin200.com. I did promise that I would share some of those photos. So let me bring that up onto my screen here. And that's what we're going to do to wrap up today, is we will share some of those pictures. There we go. Let's share one more time. And then, yeah, we'll say goodbye after that. So here we go. So this is our crew hanging out with us in South Australia. Definitely our most dedicated students. I think you guys will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you've been to all 18 of our world's most exciting classroom events geared towards classrooms in the Australia, New Zealand, kind of China, Asia part of the world. So very, very cool. So it looks like you did some calculations. You found the distances. I like how you left out Pluto. That's pretty cool, because Pluto is considered, well, it's just not considered a planet anymore. I can see, nice big group of students out there. And I can see standing there with some signs. Very cool. All right, I'm sure everybody likes to be featured in these photos. Looking pretty cool. Great work. I can see that you did some research, which is really cool. And then I can see your distances, and I think you did some pretty good guesses. It looks like you've got them in the right order, which is important as well. But as we saw from Stu's experiment, we needed to get a little bit further apart, like a kilometer apart, which, to be fair, I know you couldn't do this in the schoolyard, but you guys did really cool. That's really awesome. I like that you did the research, you got outside, and then you shared these awesome results with us. Very, very, very cool. All right. Well, we always love to see that from students. So I hope to see some classrooms sharing that experiment with us through your hot, cold, room temperature water. I hope to see some really good guesses for our curiosity of the week this week. Oh, I see our classroom is telling us that they didn't see what I just shared. Well, let me try that one more time. Okay. You should be able to see it now. I can see it on the screen. So I hope you can see it okay there. So let me share that one more time. I'm going to put it on my second screen just to make sure there's no mistake made this time. So there we go. You can see them working in the classroom, finding out the distances between the planets. You can see them out in the schoolyard, stretched out there. They've got the planets in the right order, which is great. You see that typical picture there, looking from Uranus back to the sun and then the other way around. That's pretty cool. Very, very, very cool. And like I mentioned, you guys did a great job. You did some good guesses to the distances, but I don't think you have a schoolyard over a kilometer, but you guys did great. So really great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, we love to see these pictures. We love to see classrooms, especially getting outside and trying some of that work. All right. Well, that's where we're going to leave it. We're going to have another session next week. I'm going to see if I can get one of our Darwin leaders from Australia to come and join us. That would be really cool if we had one of our Australian Darwin leaders join us, and they can share the work that they did. So I'm going to see what I can do, if I can get one of them to come in with us. But we'll have lots to share with you, hopefully some more updates from Ascension Island and things like that. But for now, I hope everybody has a great week. And yeah, we'll end off thanking our sponsors, supporters, and partners, without whom we wouldn't be doing this, sailing around the world, classroom events, research, bringing young Darwin leaders in the field. So shout out to all of our sponsors and supporters. And I hope everyone has a great week. We'll see you soon.